Sometimes, we go through things that don't break us, not in the way one might think of being broken, but in a twisted kind of unraveling. An unraveling that leaves us perfectly aligned with the highest mending possible. It was the end of 2018 when my life began to unravel. Something deep inside was screaming at me to confront the things I had tried so desperately to ignore. And there she was, staring right at me. As I looked her over, I could tell that she knew I saw her. She fed off the energy connection and sensed my focus. There was no turning back now. Ignoring her would only allow this attachment to continue haunting us. Her face was ghostly pale, framed by a deep purple Victorian dress with delicate white frills. Though her features were indistinct, each time I focused on her face, the whiteness flickered to black contorted shapes, outlining sharp teeth. The horrific sight would flash for just an instant before vanishing, leaving only beauty behind. She knew I'd seen her true form, and it thrilled her. Her laughter echoed, not through the room, but through my mind, a malicious delight so palpable I almost mistook it for my own. If I hadn't been so acutely aware of the dread coiling in my stomach, I might have thought the elation was mine. How long had she been waiting for me to acknowledge her existence? I sat in a sort of stunned silence, struggling to comprehend. Was I losing my mind? This was exactly what a psychiatrist would call a hallucination. Panic surged. They'd lock me away against my will, just like what they did to my mother. But I know I'm nothing like that woman. I struggled to accept this reality. But I couldn't ignore it any longer. Crazy or not, I had to figure it out. Nearly an hour passed, fear twisting around my throat like a vice, before I could muster the courage to speak. Sam sat beside me, staring off blankly, worry etched across his face from my withdrawal. I'm seeing someone, a woman. And I think she wants me to tell you, I finally said. Sam and I had been together for 10 years, long enough for him to know I despised any talk of ghosts, the supernatural, or anything that could get me slapped with any crazy words. But I also knew he believed. Sometimes, he'd sneak off to graveyards at night, hoping his camera would capture something lurking in the dark. He might have just gotten what he wished for. I described her in detail, and his face went pale. He told me about a dream he had when he was young, back when we lived in that unsettling old house, his childhood home. In his dream, he'd woken from a nightmare, only to see his mother standing in his bedroom doorway. Relieved, he rushed to her, but as he reached out, he fell, and she vanished. It wasn't his mother. His mind snapped back to reality, and he realized it didn't even look like her. And now, hearing what I'd described, sounded eerily similar to the figure from his dream. Fantastic. Just what I need. Some ancient entity that had been haunting my husband since he was a kid. What had I gotten myself into? A part of me wanted to retreat, to bury this encounter and forget it all. But something stronger pushed me forward, an insatiable need to unravel this and face the fear head-on. So I told her story, translating her intentions, but only after insisting she leave the room. Surprisingly, she complied. She's thrilled I'm finally telling you about her. She's been craving your attention for so long, I told my husband. I could still hear her malevolent cackling from the shadows of the other room, her joy intoxicating and vile. It was like being submerged in a swamp of thick, toxic sludge that clung to you no matter how you clawed at it. I lowered my voice. I think she hates me, I murmured. The room fell silent for a few moments. I could feel her hatred seethe. She wants you all to herself. She resents me. Sam's voice trembled.
What do we do?
His back stiffened as he sat upright, recalling a memory, his eyes wide with realization.
There's something I never told you,
he said.
I know you hated when I went out to graveyards.
Sam began, his voice laced with guilt.
It was selfish, and it's my fault this is happening. It all started about a year ago, when I had finished wandering through one of my usual haunts. I was searching for anything at all, that would prove there's more beyond this life. Those nights became my ritual, a strange pilgrimage into the quiet corners of the world where the living rarely linger.
He paused, eyes drifting as if he were back there in the cold night, a night that somehow felt different.
I was alone, and I felt this shift deep inside. I wanted more. It wasn't enough to just feel them. I wanted proof, something real. Sitting in my car, I lingered, not ready to go home. I felt lonely, lost, like I needed a connection. So I reached out, really reached out, hoping for a sign. And then I felt her. My eyes were closed, and I swear, I felt her rest her head gently in my lap, like she was saying, "You're not alone." It was a comfort I didn't know I craved. Her presence was so tangible, so real, and I soaked it in. Her energy wrapped around me, soft and warm. I don't know why I never told you about it, or why she's now appearing to you as that phantom from my childhood.
Sam stopped, searching my face for any glimmer of understanding. His eyes held an unspoken plea for hope, for reassurance that this was fixable. And though I wasn't sure it could be, I gave him a small smile. "I'm sure we'll find a way to free ourselves from this. We live in an age of information. There has to be something we can do." He held me tightly.
I don't want her between us. She needs to be gone.
His declaration was strong, but even I knew that words alone weren't enough to drive her away. So, I scoured the internet. I found crystals that work best for protection, spheres for energetic shielding, rituals, affirmations, yet none of it could rid me of this demonic attachment. If anything, my attempts seemed to make things worse. I felt drained, like my emotions were spiraling to depths I hadn't known in years. Then, one night, I stumbled across a video on shadow work. The speaker, a spiritual leader with a message different from the rest, spoke of attachments as something drawn to us, feeding on our unresolved pain.
"Forget what they're doing to your energy,"
she said.
"These attachments only exist because some part of you invited them in a moment of loneliness or trauma. Meet that part of yourself, understand it, find out what it needs, and the attachment will fall away. Do that, and it won't have anything to attach to anymore."
Could that really be the answer? I thought of what Sam had said. He was feeling lonely and had wanted a connection. But if he had invited this presence, why was I the one suffering from it? As if called forth, a heavy awareness settled over my chest, a weight that had been there my whole life, but I'd learned to just live with. Maybe this pain meant something deeper. Maybe there was a lost part of myself that was somehow attracting this situation. Could I also have something attached to me siphoning off my energy? Riddled with fear, I found a quiet place, determined to connect with this part of myself, determined to love her and find out what she needed. 1 minute passed, then 5, 10. Slowly, my mind quieted. I focused on the words from one of the spiritual videos that echoed in my memory.
"Whatever comes up is right. Don't overthink it."
Trusting the process, I allowed the images to settle. Darkness, blackness so deep it swallowed everything. An all-consuming darkness swallowed me, thick and endless, like falling through night itself. It wasn't mere absence. It felt as if the shadows were alive, pressing in on me, suffocating. My heart beat slowly, heavily in my chest, each beat echoing with a dread that sank into my bones. Every nerve in my body seemed to still, locked in place by an invisible weight that held me suspended between terror and despair. The darkness began to shift. Something within me stirred, memories flickering up from the depths like dim lights in the void, tentative and haunting. There, tall white forms rose out of the blackness. I struggled to understand. Poles? No, not poles. Crib. A crib, small and alone in the darkness. My breath caught, Why was I seeing this? What could it possibly mean? And then it came, like a wave breaking upon me. I wasn't alone here. There was something else in the darkness. The familiar taste of panic, sharp and bitter, flooding every part of me. I was no longer just an observer. I was pulled into the moment itself, feeling a terror that clawed at my heart. The darkness shifted again, and I felt its presence before I even saw it. A figure loomed over the crib, its form towering, heavy with malice, radiating an aura of such darkness it twisted the air around it. The weight of it sank into my chest like iron chains, paralyzing me in place. My lungs refused to expand, as if they too had been seized by fear itself. Then I realized it. It was not looking at me. I could feel that much. Of course it wasn't. It was looking down into the crib. The thought settled in my mind, heavy and undeniable, as if the memory itself had claws rooting deep into me. There was a shift, a sudden understanding that felt almost ancient, as if I'd known it all along. It was my crib. My body, frozen, clung to the memory, and with each second that passed, I could feel the helplessness of that tiny figure, the little soul left alone, crying out to the dark for someone to come. The creature. It had come. It had answered. It was there for me. And with that realization, a heavy sadness surfaced from somewhere deep within, pulling up pieces of me I had long forgotten, long ignored. I must have abandoned this part of myself because it was too painful to feel the loneliness that it felt. And in doing so, I was able to survive. I could go forward with my life thinking that I didn't need anyone else because I was no longer attached to the part of me that needed other people. Looking at it now and seeing the damage I did when I unconsciously abandoned this part, I felt a sorrow. This poor child was left alone and clung to the only thing that was there. That thing. Siphoning off my energy and perpetuating a deep fear of abandonment that would cause my part feeling the need to stay attached to it. And in that acknowledgement came a strange, twisted comfort. Then I felt the darkness dissolve, its icy grip on my heart loosening, even as a grief I had never dared to acknowledge took its place. Did this happen to me? I thought. Is this a memory or something more? Again, the words came to me. Whatever comes up is right. Don't question it. I took a breath, opening my heart to the frightened child within. It's time to be with this part of you, I thought. She needs you. She needs to know you're here. I felt a softening, like a frozen layer melting. Sadness flooded in, tinged with the rawness of being seen for the first time. Gently, I imagined reaching into the crib, comforting this child, letting her know she was no longer alone. Her energy melted into mine, filling me with a sense of freedom and peace. The heavy presence of that creature faded, as if it had never existed. Tears streamed down my face. I felt something new. What was this? Love? Maybe, but not the kind given to others. It felt like self-love, something I had rarely felt. Later, I shared everything with Sam.
I think I understand now,
He said.
Since that night, I've felt her presence, her influence on me. She's been playing with my emotions and making me feel impatient. It's caused me to be withdrawn from you and angry at little things. Maybe it's like you said, she's here because I needed her once. Maybe like that child needed to not be alone. Maybe we just can't help but attach to these things that are so unhealthy for us because we need something that we feel won't abandon us. I need to find my abandoned part. I need to get rid of her.
Together, we began a journey into his subconscious, exploring the pain and anger he had hidden away. We met resistance, emotional blocks, and shadows that were hard to face. But over time, through trust and unconditional acceptance, he found his way back to himself. One by one, the parts of him that needed love and compassion finally received it. And after that, the attachment dissolved, and he was free. I learned a lot from that experience and strengthened a connection with a very different type of being. When I finished working with Sam, a profound stillness settled within me, a sense of ease that ran deeper than anything I'd ever known. It was as though a vast, boundless reservoir of love had opened up inside, welling up with a wisdom that felt ancient, intimate, and alive. I could sense a presence around us, warm and gentle, embracing us with an affection beyond words. We weren't alone. I knew it as surely as I knew my own heartbeat. The space felt illuminated by an energy so pure, so deeply comforting, that it was as if we were held in the arms of a family long unseen. We came to understand these beings as the Arcturians. They had watched us from across the stars, distant kin with whom we shared a connection beyond time. I felt their gaze upon us, a collective presence radiating warmth, silently cheering us on as we took our first steps into an adventure that was less about outward journeys and more about the vast inner discovery. They seemed to hold such hope for us, witnessing us with a love unmarred by expectation. In their eyes, every choice was right, every moment sacred, a seamless, eternal glimpse into something that felt like heaven itself. We lingered together, Sam and I, basking in this love that transcended worlds, until finally the Arcturians began to fade, their essence dissolving gently back into the unseen. They left us grounded in a world that now seemed, by contrast, bound by its own limitations, a reality formed from science, physicality, scarcity. But something within us had shifted irrevocably. A profound truth had settled into my heart, a truth that would reshape everything. To know that this kind of energy existed at all, that such beings could love so unconditionally, was almost incomprehensible. And yet, Sam and I both felt it, both saw it, both understood that they were here for us. For hours, Sam and I sat in this energy, an unbreakable bond of love and strength. When the presence faded, I knew our world had changed. I was no longer afraid. With every fear and every negative belief I dismantled, I rebuilt with love, finding strength in the unity of our spirits. This journey was only beginning, but I knew, without a doubt, that it was the only path forward for me. With quiet assurance, they let us know that we were never alone, that we could call upon them whenever we needed. And I understood, in a way that defied words, that this connection was ours to nurture, not just for ourselves, but for anyone willing to step into their own shadow and embrace their truest self. And so, my spiritual coaching journey, later called Emotional Resolutions, began. In the days that followed, I took each painful belief I'd held about myself and the world, and began breaking them down, examining the patterns, and slowly, with reverence, building something new. I aligned each thought with self-love, with the endless abundance I now felt moving through the universe. Everything felt enchanted, teeming with marvels I'd once been too bound by fear to see. And in this way, I found a deeper understanding of the human psyche, of the magnetic laws that draw us to our own healing, of our own light, and the immense power we all hold within.